what does it take for a New York State driver's license? 50 hours of practice, 15 have got to be at night, 5-hour class of instruction that you need to pass, or driver's ed for a semester. And then you need a road test to prove that you are a competent driver. And after all of that, there's still road signs, stoplights, traffic signals, stop signs, guardrails, rumble strips, all to keep you and the other people on the road safe. But what if when my son was young, I just tossed him the keys and said, you've got this. Hey, you want to drive. You enjoy that, and you know how to even turn the car on. Just go figure it out yourself. He's ready for that. Well, he's got his license now. That would be a disaster, wouldn't it? That would be a disaster. And yet, that's exactly what sometimes we do with something just as dangerous. See, we've got devices in our pockets that open a whole new wide world of unlimited information and many dangers without road signs, without warning signals, with no rumble strips and no guardrails. And our kids and our teens, they grow up with devices and screens around them all the time. It's all around us. And so we almost naturally, we give technology, because after all, we have good reasons. We want them to be able to call us if there's a problem. We want them to call 911 if there's danger. We want them to be safe. We also probably don't want them to be different than everybody else at school around them and a contrast to their friends. We want to help them. We think it'll help in their education. We want to give them good things. We're their parents. We love them. And so we want to give them good, but often we give technology with very little guidance. And phones can have incredible potential and pitfalls all at the same time. See, phones and tablets are very common. They're understandable. But just because they're understandable and common and our kids know how to use them almost intuitively does not mean that they will use them wisely. Screens are so pervasive in our society, they're all around us. And I just want to take a second here. Anybody here that has a phone, why don't you raise that up? Who's got a phone with them today? I do. How many of us have a phone? And if you don't have one with you, how many have access to one at some point in their life or a screen of some type? Screens are pervasive. Technology is pervasive all around us all the time. Nearly all of us have ongoing access to digital media at some level. In talking with some of you over the last couple weeks, what I found is many of us just naturally know that not all is well when it comes to our screen use. We know this. We feel this. We can sense the tension. Think about it. How about on breaks at work? Do you see people around the break table deeply connecting with deep relational conversations? Or many of them maybe spread around the room with their hands and their heads and their phone. How many of us have ever gone out to eat and watched other people on dates sitting next to each other with their eyes so deeply connected, longing for each other, holding on every word, or separately on their phones across the table? How many of us have been in the same room as someone else and got a text from them instead of them coming over to talk? Or maybe we've done it. I don't know. Screens are pervasive, and what we sense is not all is always well. People are walking, they're driving, they're working, they're sitting in school, all on their phones or other types of devices. We feel the draw, we feel the temptation all at the same time. But here's the rub. Our devices are incredible tools, aren't they? They're incredibly important all at the same time. There's nearly infinite content right at our fingertips. And so our phones help us. They help us search for answers when we need information. They help us keep up with the news. They help us navigate roads. How many use them as a GPS? I did that this past weekend. I had to make a trip to Rochester. They help us even do math. I remember in high school, my teacher said, "You'll never have a calculator in your pocket." I do. We use them to save memories, to share memories, to connect with people and friends and family. We use them for entertainment, to decompress, or to read a good book. We also have phones, they allow us to stay organized, to stay on diet, to stay on exercise, even deodorize. There's got to be an app for that, right? According to Pew Research, 95% of adults and teens have access to digital media, to smartphones. 95% of us. And here's the interesting thing. 48% of adults self-describe their use of their phone as, "I cannot live without it." Cannot live without it. And almost all of the teenagers self-describe their use of phones and digital media as almost constantly. Now, they don't mean every second of every day, but continually ongoing throughout every day, throughout the time that they're awake. Almost constantly. See, we live in a digital world. It is our reality. It is our young people's reality. It's the world we live in. That's where we're at right now. But what if this is truly bigger than one generation? What if this struggle, this digital struggle, has a more root problem, a bigger root struggle that goes way beyond the generations? And what if we can actually help the next generation with digital screens, to use them wisely, to grow and to use the benefits and not get lost in the pitfalls? I want to take a look at some principles today from God's word and just consider, while we may not find screens and internet and media in the Bible, the principles of God's word highlight root struggles that are the same things we fight with today. We just fight with them in a little different way. So take a look with me at some of these principles. Nearly 2,000 years ago, Jesus' friend John wrote about the world, and this is what he said about the world. He says, "For the world offers only a craving for physical pleasure, a craving for everything we see, and pride in our accomplishments and our possessions. And these are not from the Father, but are from this world." And then he says, "And this world is fading along with everything people crave." It sounds a lot like today. The world offers that craving for physical pleasure, craving for pleasure from our eyes, what we put in. And yet those pleasures they won't last. They will gradually fade. Think about screens. They're morally neutral. Our screens are morally neutral. But our cravings and our media is not. Today, fast-paced scrolling videos are kind of the way things get given to us via media today. It's captivating hundreds of millions every minute, getting them stuck in a loop of scrolling. TikTok is named for this. It's a whole platform, and it's named for that exact idea. And the idea is repeated or replaced media every few ticks of the clock. That's why it exists. That's what it does. It's one of the most successful platforms today, and the rest of them are following suit. And the question might be why? Simply put, it's addicting. It's addicting. You get hooked. You get hooked with cravings for what you see and cravings of physical pleasure. And Katie Greer is a former director of internet safety with the Massachusetts Attorney General's office. And she recently came to our area to Endicott School and was explaining how all this works. And what she did was a test. She tested TikTok. So she got on TikTok with no background, no brand new account. And she said, I'm going to find out how it learns about me. And she decided, I won't comment, I won't like, I won't post, I won't interact. The only thing I'm going to do is scroll. Okay? And from her scrolling, in less than 24 hours, it had figured out what her political views were and what candidate she planned to vote for. Less than 24 hours, without any interaction other than scrolling. So what do you linger on? What takes a couple extra seconds before you scroll on to the next? And it figured her out. And that's what it's meant to do. It has what's called a learning algorithm. And TikTok throws 15% of its content at you just to figure out what you like. And it'll use that to then funnel you the things that keep you on what you want to continue to watch, to get you hooked in. 5% of their content, they just throw at you as adult content, just to see if maybe you'll go down that trail, and then they'll hook. It's discovering cravings for what you see. It's bigger than just a trend, though. It's based on brain chemistry. Who's heard of dopamine? A chemical within our brain. And when you see something you like, something that excites you, your brain releases dopamine. And you enjoy that chemical. And it only lasts a little bit of time. And then something else that you like will introduce that dopamine again. And what that does is trigger your cravings for physical pleasure. And it keeps it going. It produces a chemical addiction over time. The more you receive of dopamine, the more you need. The more you want. To get that physical pleasure, you got to have more. And eventually, it keeps cycling and cycling. You want to repeat that stimulus. And so each one of the major platforms like X, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, they're all using this scrolling and reeling type interface now. They're not as effective as TikTok, but that's where they want to go. And the idea is to get us hooked, to get us stuck. Instead of movies or concerts, we end up getting fed a sequence of endless clips that lock us into a loop. Everything's designed to lock into that addictive loop. And like any chemical addiction, you need to have more and more and more to feel the same level of pressure. The problem is, over time, that pleasure, what does it do? It fades. John had that figured out. Our cravings will eventually fade. The pleasure will fade. And the more you keep scrolling, no longer then to get the pleasure, just to not receive dopamine deprivation. I just got to keep the level I'm at. And you want more, and you want more, and you want more. The trouble is, the result isn't happiness, it's depression. And people online actually self-describe this as doom scrolling. That's their terminology. And apparently that's what people do for fun. That sounds like fun to me. But studies show in the Western world, so this is across our society, America and other Western countries, that there's a great happiness decline over the last couple decades. And it has led to psychiatric problems, and across the medical field, this is very understood. I was amazed just researching and diving into this topic, how much the secular world understands these problems. And so there's all kinds of problems that are showing up now and being diagnosed, and all from digital dementia, Facebook depression, FOMO. We can have that without screens. I think I was born into that problem. Internet addiction disorder, video game addiction. And for many, digital detox is a huge struggle. It's a huge struggle. It's frightening. Withdrawal is real, and it feels impossible to unplug. We think of the 48% of adults that described, I can't live without it. Can't live without it. See, our world thinks freedom is indulgence without limits. But that's not working out so good. It's not working. What if there's another option? I'm going to take a look at Romans chapter 12. If you would turn or tap with me to Romans chapter 12, we're going to look at the first few verses there. If you don't have a Bible, we have Bibles in your rows. We'd love you to have one of those. You may take it as our gift. I'll be on page 913 in the chair Bible. Romans chapter 12. You see, Paul was an ultra-committed Jew. And he wrote the book of Romans because when he met Jesus, everything changed. And he went from an ultra-committed, legalistic Jew to a committed, devoted Jesus follower, wrapped up in God's grace. Paul was all in. And check out his advice in Romans 12. And Paul says, "Dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God." And the idea is all of ourselves, to give ourselves to God. Paul says, because of all that he's done for you. He came for you. He died for you. He sacrificed himself for you. He loves you. He wants good things for you. Give him yourself. And Paul goes on and he says, let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind that he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. Don't copy the behavior and the customs of this world, but let God transform you. It says, let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Not that you would be stuck into a copy of the way the world thinks, but opening your mind to truth. Paul says, then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. But God's got great things for us. He wants the best for us.